Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. This is Glossy Philosophy. My name is Jansen Bidman and today you are tuned in for a book talk. Today we are talking about one of Shakespeare's most well-known and well-loved plays, Hamlet. It is a tragedy, absolutely, through and through, and it has been played almost more than any of the other plays that he has written. So let's just do a little housekeeping. We're not really going to go into who Shakespeare was because I feel like everybody kind of knows a little bit about Shakespeare. So let's just kind of dive into it a little bit. Now there's all this talk lately about whether Shakespeare actually wrote any of his plays or if it was Queen Elizabeth or if it was a bunch of people or what was going on. When I read the information in the foreword and also the preface, it made it sound like it was pretty conclusive amongst Shakespeare scholars that he wrote a majority of it, and it may, just with printing and with performing and kind of continuing to edit the plays, may have had other people contribute to his works, but nothing is clear even now. So they're still working on it, but it seems like it's pretty obvious that William Shakespeare wrote most of the plays that we attribute to him, and a good chunk that we can still attribute it to William Shakespeare, or one person at least. In Hamlet especially, there's also a lot of talk about Folio 1 and Folio 2. If you don't know what those are, don't worry. It basically just means that the printing process and the editions that came out have been they're very different. Folio 1 is super different from Folio 2, so there's a lot of kind of disagreement or conversation about how characters should be portrayed and how lines should be, like what order they should be. If you go see Hamlet, if you read Hamlet, you don't need to worry about any of this. I just wanted to get that out there in case you are a super nerd like myself and are really interested in going a little bit deeper. But most editions, especially from the Folger Shakespeare Library, are going to update you on what's going on with all the folios and what's going on with the did Shakespeare write this, did he not write it saga. So now that we have that kind of out of the way, now I want to dig into the book. So a very, very quick summary. By the way, if you don't know Hamlet, you do, because the lines are so popular. There's so many lines that we use still in everyday language. You definitely know the story. It's very similar to The Lion King, but much, much more tragic. No happy ending. So quick synopsis of Hamlet, which is like one of the longest plays, by the way. But a quick synopsis of Hamlet is that Prince Hamlet is away at university studying when he finds out that his father has passed away unexpectedly. He rushes home thinking that he's going to have to become king, only to find that his mother has already remarried. And not only has she remarried, she's remarried the uncle. So she's remarried the brother of her husband. And Hamlet will not become king. He will stay prince until this king passes away. And if they have an heir, then it just gets really messy. So there's also a ghost kind of walking around the castle, and it won't talk to anybody, but it does talk to Hamlet. And when it talks to Hamlet, it tells of this horrible tale. And it is also in the kind of shape and voice and look of Hamlet's dead father. And the ghost says that he was poisoned by his brother, who is now king, and that the ghost expects Hamlet to revenge or avenge him and the family name, and also to find out if like his mom knew anything about it. So Hamlet spends a good portion of the play trying to figure out who is on his side, who is on King Claudius's side, and whether or not his mother knew anything, and also just being really angry, obviously. So he finds out that his uncle did actually commit this murder, and you get to decide if Queen Gertrude knew anything about this. There's also a love interest, Ophelia, which kind of comes in and out. There's madness that happens, literal and kind of feigning madness. There is a sword fight. There is more poison, and there are many, many more deaths. So in the end, pretty much everybody dies except for Horatio, who is Hamlet's best friend. So that is the quick synopsis of Hamlet. Now, Hamlet was not created, the story of Hamlet was not created by William Shakespeare. He definitely took it from an old, like, folk tale from Denmark, and we don't really have that story necessarily, but we do have kind of snippets of the original story. So just to give you kind of a brief synopsis on that one, basically it's the same thing except that Hamlet is a little boy, or much younger, and in Denmark he is expected to avenge his dead father, and he is expected to basically, like an eye for an eye, murder his uncle. So we don't necessarily get that feeling in the play of Hamlet, but it's good information to know because it does make a difference with Hamlet's motivation in Shakespeare's version. Because the more you dig into this play, the more you start to question, why can't he just let it go? He already knows the truth. Why does he feel like he needs to keep going, especially after he starts to commit crimes and murders as well? So there's a little bit of background information on that. Now, I am not a Shakespeare scholar. However, I do read quite a bit of Shakespeare, and I do read about the Shakespeare plays, and I've definitely read about Hamlet, and I've also seen it a few times. So these are just my thoughts, and obviously they are influenced on what I've read from actual Shakespearean scholars as well. I wanted to talk about a couple scenes and a couple characters in the play. So again, if you haven't read the play or you haven't seen it, I know I already did a huge spoiler alert with the quick synopsis, but you might want to skip this part, read it, and then come back and watch the rest of this video. But first I want to talk about the character of Polonius. Now, Polonius is the father of Ophelia and Laertes. He is a busybody. He's also a courtier. So he is just in everybody's business. He's in, like, his daughter's business, his son's business. He is spying on literally everyone. It seems like he wants to get ahead with the king, with the new king, especially King Claudius, but it doesn't go well for him. He does end up getting murdered by Hamlet. But he has some of the most well-known lines, and in his first speech or introduction to Polonius is, I think, one of the best in Shakespeare for sure, because he's got to do quite a few things in his opening scene. He is saying goodbye to his son Laertes, who is a young man and is going off to kind of make his way in the world and just figure himself out. They obviously are wealthy people and well-bred, because he talks about how to deal with money and how to deal with other people and their money and things like that. And just the fact that he's able to go off definitely tells me that the family is doing pretty well. Now, there doesn't seem to be a mother in this situation, so it is all Polonius. So we'll give him a little bit of a breather there for just being so into everybody's business. But his speech to Laertes is all about doing the opposites. So he says, like, go and listen to what everybody says, but don't take it to heart. And make sure that you spend your money, but don't spend all of your money. Make sure that you look good, but don't over look good. So it's all of these polar opposites that he's telling Laertes. It's kind of all over the place. It is definitely reminiscent of something that you might say to a kid going off to college, and it's just like word vomit almost. Like, let me tell you all of these things that you should and shouldn't do. Don't take it too seriously, but do take it seriously, kind of thing. He also says neither a borrower nor a lender be, which is very famous. And he also says, to thine own self be true. And that's one of his last lines to Laertes. And if we just pause for a moment on that line, to thine own self be true, if you take it out of context, like, what a brilliant line, right? Just be yourself, be who you are, and you'll be fine, and just always come back to who you are. When it comes from Polonius, we have to take a step back and kind of laugh at that a little bit, because he just got done saying, do this, but don't do this. Do this, but don't do this. Do this, but don't do this. He's telling his son exactly who he should be and what he should do and how he should look and how he shouldn't look. And then he's saying, but just be yourself. But really what he's saying is, be the person that I want you to be and what I just told you to be, and be true to that instead of who you actually are. He pretty much does the same thing to Ophelia after Laertes goes away. He knows that Ophelia is involved with Hamlet in some capacity, but he's not exactly sure the level of their romance. And remember that Hamlet is the prince and Ophelia is just a courtier's daughter. So the probability of them marrying isn't great. Princes usually marry princesses. They don't normally marry below that level. However, side note, it is really interesting that Shakespeare kind of plays with this, because he writes this in the time of Queen Elizabeth, who is the daughter of Anne Boleyn, who was a courtier and not of royal blood, who did marry the King of England, King Henry VIII. So just keep that in the backside of your pocket. And he asks Ophelia, what is your relationship with Hamlet? Like, what's going on? Are you okay? Has it gone too far? What's happening? And Ophelia basically just, she's like an ingenue. It seems like we never really get a good feel of who Ophelia is, except in one speech before her mad stuff that happens when she's actually quite verbal. But she says, I don't know. I don't know what to think. I can't really tell you. And it's interesting because we don't know if she's just being like, Dad, like, stop bugging me. I'm fine. Or if she really is kind of just that super innocent young woman who's like, I really don't know. Like, sometimes he's attentive, sometimes he's not. He's going through a rough time kind of thing. But his dad did just die. And Polonius answers her almost in the same way that he answers his son Laertes, which is, don't worry, I will think for you, and I will tell you exactly how you should act and what you should think. So Polonius, even though he's kind of a comical character in this really tragic play, he is also kind of a dangerous character, because he's that character that you feel like you could pass by and maybe not even notice, but he can cause a lot of trouble. He does end up sending a guy to spy on his son, who is traveling and trying to make his own way in the world. And in the same token, he also ends up spying on Ophelia and Hamlet during one of the most famous scenes in the play, which is Get Thee to a Nunnery scene from Hamlet. And then Ophelia answers with this like heartbreaking speech about how Hamlet used to be so amazing and how everybody wanted to be him and how awful it is to see a mind at waste. So Polonius is a tricky character, and if you were acting this out or directing this, it would be really interesting to play him, because you could play him kind of like a fuddy-duddy, but he's a dangerous fuddy-duddy, because again, he's telling everybody what to do, what to think, what to wear, and spying on everybody, and really just kind of looking out for himself, although he has a very sweet, kind of stupid tongue, if you follow me. So that's Polonius. So anything that Polonius says, you have to take with you have to think about it a little bit. That is something that I do love about this play, especially because everybody's speeches, you just don't know what their motivation is. You get to decide as a reader, as a viewer, as an actor, as a director, where you want to go with this. Is it serious? Is it not serious? Is Hamlet mad? Is he not mad? Did Gertrude know? Did she not know? All of these choices you get to make because Shakespeare has left open a whole bunch of like open spots for you to really dig into these characters and dig into the plot and decide for yourself. So that is really fun. All right, so we're done with Polonius. Polonius ends up getting stabbed by Hamlet eventually from also watching this conversation that's supposed to be an intimate conversation, not intimate, but a one-on-one with his mother, and then he like sneezes and gets stabbed. So goodbye, Polonius. Now we need to talk about Hamlet, obviously, because he's kind of the star of the play, right? So every time I read this, I'm always re-questioning, is Hamlet actually mad or is he not mad? Is he just playing at it? And I definitely think every time I've come to the conclusion that he is not mad, he is playing at it. However, this time when I read it, I found myself feeling there were a couple times when he does trip over into that actual madness. And I have to think that someone who is so bent on destroying somebody else, literally, like taking their life, and when he does start to take people's lives, that has to be a little maddening. He has to have kind of crossed that line of his ability to think through and process, because his reaction to stabbing Polonius is quite on the crazy side. He hides the body for quite a while and he won't tell anyone. And I know that he is supposed to be acting like he's mad, which is kind of a safety against his uncle. He doesn't want to also be murdered by his uncle. But it's also a little too far. And because of Hamlet's actions and everything, it makes Ophelia in turn become literally crazy and mad. And then once again, you get to decide if she commits suicide or not. So I don't think Hamlet is actually mad, but I do think he trips over into madness every once in a while. But he's able to pull it back and he's able to kind of refocus and become himself again, which is kind of astounding if you really think about his situation, because he's obviously a young guy who is at school, at college, hears however many days after this incident has occurred with his father, who he obviously loved and adored and thought the world of, and thought that his parents had a wonderful marriage, and then all of a sudden he comes home. Not only is his father gone for nobody knows why, but his mom is married to somebody else, and not even just like somebody else, but the uncle. I mean, it's just too weird. That would be very disturbing. And then on top of that, he doesn't become king. He's been training his whole life to step into the role of king. And now he has to stay a prince. I mean, it's very bizarre. On top of all that, his wordplay with his uncle and his uncle's wordplay with him on the relationship between being father and son, and also cousin and nephew and uncle. And it's just really interesting to, if you really pay attention, and again, if you read the play instead of just watching it or attending an actual play, you will notice that they never say father, son to each other. And I think Hamlet might like backtrack once and say father, but he first says uncle, and it's definitely during his madness stage when he flips into father. He's being kind of a whippersnapper at that point. So Hamlet has this really great speech, soliloquy, right? We all know that to be or not to be, the one where he's questioning life itself, to commit suicide, to not commit suicide. And he just kind of goes through, you know, all of these reasons why you should and why you shouldn't. And in the end, he does decide that, yes, committing suicide is actually the way to go. So if we put a pin in that until later, he does kind of commit suicide at the end of the play, because even though he's been poisoned by Laertes' poisonous sword, he himself really ends his life by drinking the poisonous wine that was from his uncle. So think about that. And then, but the speech I want to talk about is the "Get thee to a nunnery." So as with a lot of things that Hamlet says, you have to think of it in multiple ways. You have to think of it as Hamlet being crazy, Hamlet being sane, but like being a whippersnapper, and Hamlet just being really sad. So there are so many levels to this speech, and if you watch it, it is kind of infuriating as a female to watch this interaction between Hamlet and Ophelia, because you know that they like each other and there has been some kind of a romance going on. We're not really sure how far it's gotten, but they've known each other for a very long time and they're very comfortable with each other, and he just digs into her, or what feels like digs into her, and she is just so shocked and so hurt. It's kind of a brutal scene to watch, but if you read it, if you read his actual speech, you will find that there are so many hidden meanings in there. So first of all, get thee to a nunnery. A nunnery back then, in Elizabethan age, could have been an actual nunnery, or it could have been a brothel. So a lot of speeches to Ophelia, a lot of the things that he says to Ophelia are very like double entendre, very like, it could be really sexual, it could not be sexual as well. So he is really playing that line between those two things with her, and almost everything that he says to her until she also dies, and then it's just like pure love. So that's really interesting, that certain level. But his main point of the speech of "Get thee to a nunnery" is not for Ophelia to like, you know, get out of my sight, go away from me, how dare you. And by the way, she's just given back all of his love tokens. So like, ouch, you know, just twist that dagger a little bit more. Thanks, Polonius. He's really saying, I hope you go to a nunnery and I hope that you never have children, because what if you get pregnant with a boy? And what if that boy is like all the men, turns out to be all the men that I know, including myself, and we are awful, we are terrible, I don't know any good man, and I would not wish that on my worst enemy, is basically what he's saying. So he's not necessarily like digging into her. I think he's having one of those moments where he does lose his mind a little bit, and he's just so frustrated and so angry with what's going on. He's already spoken to the ghost, so he knows something is not right. And he's also just like so hurt with his mother, and then Ophelia gives him back his love tokens. And we don't know if he knows that he's being spied on at this time as well. So if you think about being spied on, it's a really interesting thing that Shakespeare plays with in this play, because in Elizabethan England, Elizabeth herself is spying on everybody. She is constantly looking for traitors. She is constantly looking for people who want to do her in. And so, and the idea of Shakespeare having the guts to write about a king who does spy on everybody and is like considered evil is really gutsy, Shakespeare. Okay, so just put that on the back burner for a moment. The last thought I want to leave you with is Hamlet. Going back to Hamlet's character for just a little bit. Hamlet is a very different character for Shakespeare. He kind of straddles the line between three different roles. He is a hero, he is a fool, and he is also a villain. So if we think of the characters like Iago from Othello, who says a lot of very sexual double entendre references about Othello and other women that are in the cast, it is very reminiscent of how Hamlet speaks to the women in this play, how he speaks to Ophelia and how he speaks to Gertrude. He plays a fool because he plays at being mad, and especially when he's talking to Polonius and King Claudius, he has that fool speech. It is, he's throwing verbal daggers at you, but you're not exactly sure if it's true, and you're not sure if he's in his right mind, which I think he is. But he gets to play the fool. The fool in Shakespeare also gets to be crazy, but actually is the only one who can see what's going on. And that is true in his comedies and in his tragedies. Basically, in any time you see a fool, if you listen to the fool knows what's really going on, and so does Hamlet. Hamlet's like one of the only characters who knows what's actually going on. And he gets to play the hero because if we think about the origin of Hamlet, he is supposed to avenge his dead father, and that's exactly what this whole play is about. It is about seeking revenge, an eye for an eye, and taking care of business. So he gets to play that hero, and at the end, his friend Horatio actually does say that he is a hero, and the new king who comes in to take over, like, what luck, everyone is dead, and this new guy comes in and just gets to take over, says that Hamlet is going to get a hero's burial. So as an actor, as a director, as a viewer, you get to see one character inhabit three different kinds of Shakespearean characters, which is incredible. And Hamlet's speeches are long, and I think in some of his speeches he inhabits all three, and I think it would be really, really hard to play the role of Hamlet. So if you are lucky enough to go see Hamlet, make sure that you give lots and lots of big claps for whoever plays Hamlet, because this is probably one of the most difficult roles a person would be able to play, is going to be Hamlet, inhibiting all three of those types of characters. And that is the book talk. Thank you guys so much for watching this. I think Shakespeare is so interesting and so worthwhile to read and get reacquainted with every year, whether you're reading his poems, his sonnets, his songs, his plays, anything. His use of wordplay and his use of themes and his storylines are just, they're classic. You see them everywhere in modern literature, movies, TV shows. It is very important, I think, to know where original storylines come from, and also just, it's good literature. So normally I do fashion videos every Wednesday, beauty videos on Fridays, and Mondays are quick tips and tricks to making your life a little bit easier. So make sure that you hit that thumbs up, make sure you hit the subscribe, and I will see you very soon in the next one. Bye!